emergent studies that say that this is a good idea. And I mean, this is kind of advice to the prescriber here about what you need to write. But, you know, basically if folks have failed, or the drugs have failed them, the first two drugs I mentioned, then we'll consider this. I will say about slow-release oral morphine is that it's not, you know, it's not all roses and sunshine. The way we prescribe it is that you will probably only ever have daily witness ingestion, and that you need to go to the pharmacy and they'll open it and sprinkle it in applesauce, and you take it observed on a daily basis. The other drugs, if you build up enough cachet or trust or stability, then will eventually give you a week at a time or so. With the slow-release morphine, at least at this point, we only ever give it for daily. So somebody would have to be okay with the idea that they're going to have to go to a pharmacy every day for it. So in this, a lot of people will self-select that, gee, that sounds great and all, but did I lose this? I'd rather use, I think I did.
I think it's time for a smoke break.
We're out of, definitely. So, yeah, I think we've lost this, but I'll just project my voice. So that's slow-release oral morphine. Any questions on that?
Why is it only allowed once a day?
There is a formulation where it lasts for 24 hours, so the little pellets will release it in a consistent way over the 24-hour period.
Well, say I'm an addict and I'm up to 400 milligrams. Why can't I get 200 in the morning and 200 at night?
To be honest, there was a time where the 24-hour formulation was a shortage, and so we actually did have to switch to the 12-hour one. I think it's just a drag having to go in twice a day, so I think people would prefer. Right. Oh, is it? Okay.
Can you hear?
Check. Nope. Turning off. Turning on. It's possible the battery died. Yes?
I have two questions. I'm wondering, first of all, what the possibilities are for people who need prescriptions for methadone and Suboxone in this area who don't have a doctor. And then the other one is, what is the opportunity or process of doing heroin-assisted treatment in this area as well?
Good questions. I'm aware of my time. I'm going to get to those questions in my next slides here. I'm going to try and move myself along here. I knew this was going to happen. Okay, so next step on mind being blown, something called IOT. It's like iPhone, right? So the I is for injectable, OAT. So this includes diacetylmorphine, which is the fancy way to describe heroin, and then hydromorphone, or Dilaudid. There were some famous studies done in Vancouver, one called Naomi and one called Salome, that basically showed that for some folks that methadone did not work for, time after time, going in and have witnessed injections of heroin did better. Surprise, surprise. So in Vancouver, there are some clinics where, there's the Crosstown Clinic, where you can go in and get dispensed 2 or 3 times a day injectable opioid. And this has been super well studied. It's kind of costly to implement, but there was even financial studies that kind of compared it to not providing that, and the added, you know, sort of legal and emergency encounter room costs and everything. It was still cheaper to give people this injectable heroin. So it still has yet to roll out, much beyond that, even though, well, I blame that mostly on the Conservative federal government, but the Health Canada just last 2 weeks ago, basically, I think most of us were surprised because we thought this day would never come, but they're basically setting in motion a relaxing on how we might access some of these therapies. So I'd say stay tuned on that one. But as of yet, there's no rule application for IOT. The closest thing that anyone's doing is a prescription model, or sorry, a pharmacy-based model where, say, I would prescribe you to get 100 milligrams of Dilaudid twice a day, and you would go into the pharmacy, the pharmacist would give you the vial, you would go into a side room, inject it, and then come back later on that day. So it's still in a supervised site.
What's the advantage of injected rather than other delivery?
This is definitely for people that nothing else is working. And again, this goes back to my earlier posited theory that some people's brains just need to be stimulated in a certain way, and no, imposters or replacements are going to work. They need the real deal, and they will only ever stabilize with the real deal. So that's why this injectable form is used. And I'd say it's a third line, so we try everything else, and if everything fails, then we'll consider that one. And then on this guideline, underneath all of this, of course, is harm reduction, which I think most folks are pretty savvy on. We've done a pretty excellent job, I think, of prolifically distributing naloxone kits. And then the other aspects of this are these supervised consumption sites, which are, I think, at least in part of the reason why we're seeing this drop-off in Island and Vancouver Coastal. NIH, there's this van, I think, that goes through Kelowna and Kamloops, but as of yet, we don't have a rural application of a supervised consumption site. Okay, so the last bit here, I'm sort of talking about what's new, what's on the horizon, what can we get excited about. So I just wanted to mention about Suboxone. The traditional way is you have to be dope sick, so you have to be in withdrawal for generally about 24 hours before we can even start it. If you're not in this sort of state of withdrawal, it can itself precipitate withdrawal, put you into withdrawal, which is quite uncomfortable. So, we've kind of dealt with this for years, and we've accepted these risks. But for some people, they just cannot tolerate being in withdrawal for 24, 36 hours or so to safely start this drug. So there's this new, it's new, in a city called Bern in Switzerland. They did this technique of starting people on a very small amount of Suboxone and then slowly increasing it, while still telling people that they could keep using their illicit substance. And so the theory being that you're slowly displacing the illicit drug with the Suboxone, and it works. And so in Vancouver, I'm almost done my fellowship in Vancouver, but I would say, even in the last 2 months, I would say I'm only starting people on microdose now. I'm not starting people the more traditional way, because you can start people right now. It's not like come back to me in 2 days when you're in withdrawal. Maybe they'll follow up, maybe they won't. I can write a prescription for a week. They can just go to the pharmacy and get their slowly increasing dosage without me having to see them every day. And basically by day 5 or 6, their illicit drug isn't working anymore because all the receptors are being blocked by Suboxone. So, ta-da, they're on Suboxone. So this is a game changer, I think, and it's really going to change the uptake for Suboxone. Another cool thing about this microdose technique is doing transitions, like people who are on high-dose methadone, but they want to be on Suboxone. It used to be a chore that took weeks or months for people to come down on methadone, and then we go up on Suboxone. I can now microdose transition somebody within a week from high-dose methadone to appropriate dose of Suboxone painlessly. So this is something exciting. What else is new? Drug testing using mass spectrometry. This is to help people know what's in their drugs and hopefully change their usage patterns. I don't want to drop the surprise, but I think we might see something like this in the West Kootenays. Dispensing oral hydromorphone. Those who saw Dr. Tyndall speak in Nelson a few months ago, this is an idea more from a public health perspective that in the context of this poison drug supply, what if we just started giving out oral Dilaudid for people to use however they use it, crush it up and inject it or whatever. And he sort of has this idea around a vending machine and whatnot. So, interesting idea. We'll see how this pilot works, and this is something he'll be launching in a small area in Vancouver.
Sam, could you mention something about, like, from a public health perspective, that if there was an Ebola crisis, how we would deal with it versus the opioid crisis? That might give a bit of more of a perspective on why we would do that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think Alex's point here is that if, and we all remember SARS, we all remember Ebola, and how much hype it had, and how much money was thrown, and how it changed everything we did to hello? Oh yeah. To address this crisis with quite a bit of money and support. And so Dr. Tyndall's idea is, what if we looked at this opioid crisis in the same way and made treatments available in the same way? So I will say it's a bit controversial, but I'm interested to see how his pilot goes. Moving on, this is the next stage of blowing your mind. So psychedelics. Yeah, this is where things get a little bit weird. So if we look back as far as the 1950s, in Canada's own Saskatchewan, we actually used LSD in trials to treat schizophrenia and alcoholism. And it didn't work at all for people with schizophrenia. It did work for people with alcoholism. I think it's been a while since I read the study, but I think it's like 10% of people at 6 months were still sober, which blows the pants off of anything else that we use for people. And even, this is another anecdote here, but even if we, 2 minutes, okay. I won't tell my amusing anecdotes. So we have this old trial, psilocybin. We have some recent trials that show benefit for reducing drinking and tobacco use disorder. This is folks that just had 2 sort of observed experiences with psilocybin, very small sample size, 15 for smoking. At 6 months, 12 of them still weren't smoking. I mean, again, our very best drug, Champix, has a success rate of like 25%, so this is like more than double that. So, this is all very exciting stuff that's just starting to be studied. The restrictions on it after 50 years are just starting to be lifted. So I wonder in 5-10 years as an addiction specialist if I won't be able to write a prescription for psilocybin-assisted therapy for somebody with any kind of addiction. And just to wrap up here around policy changes, decriminalization. This is its own talk, but we can look at the Portugal model where they decriminalized simple possession of all drugs, including hard drugs. They took all that money that they were spending on policing and locking people up and courting people and put it into treatment. And what did they find after 15 years? Decrease in deaths, decrease in disease transmission, decrease in youth usage, no overall increase. Like, that was the fear. Oh my God, everybody's going to start using it. And of course, increased access to treatment. And then the question around regulation, and this is the real reason why I'm sharing these is because these are conversations being had by, not wacky people. The chief coroner of BC, Dr. Perry Kendall, the chief medical officer, police chiefs are wondering about regulation and decriminalization in the context of this poison drug environment where you don't know what's in cocaine, you don't know what's in what you're buying. What if there was a safe supply for people to access? We know that people will always use some kind of substance. It's happened since time immemorial. What if we regulated it? And so there is no good example of this, so I can't point to a country and say, see, it worked. But this is another policy idea. So to wrap up, what are we doing about it? We're giving out naloxone kits. We're trying to improve our access to OAT. And I think rurally, we're education. I think we're trying to get better at having easy access. To your question about methadone and Suboxone in the communities, we're doing okay. There is nobody in Trail. There is now somebody in Grand Forks. I mean, we're slowly getting there. We're trying to encourage family doctors to consider prescribing Suboxone because it's not that hard. It doesn't have to be done in an addiction clinics, and we're slowly getting some uptake on that. And then some of these other therapies beyond Suboxone, we can consider. And then here's the easy part, right? So now we just need to solve these social determinants of health, affordable housing, address some of these other social issues, better access to trauma-specific therapies, and just really just build a more caring and compassionate society that is inclusive of our brothers and sisters, I think is the long game here. And I mentioned the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations for health, which I think would go a long way as well. So to review one last time, we've got these two issues. We've got to keep people from dying using these treatments I've mentioned, and then we've got this bigger task which will take the decades in front of us. And I think I'm definitely out of time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Zach. Clearly that was a pile of information, hard to stick in 1 hour. But hey, this is what happens. So we are a little behind. We're going to take about a 10-minute break now. Just before we do, I want to let you know we're going to have a breakout sessions right after the break. So just looking at my clock, let's say at 2:25, we're going to try and get the breakout sessions going. So the way that's going to work is we're going to have there were 3 choices. If you selected the trauma-informed care group, that's going to remain in this room. We are going to need to move some tables and chairs. We're asking if you could take your own chair to the group you're in, that would help. We're going to need about 9 tables in this half of that half, so that quarter space. And for that group, that is, we're going to have Ann Livingston and Dr. Alexis Crabtree doing the stigma decriminalization and drug use session. So that's in there. So about 9 tables. If we can get some help with that, please bring a chair. And then we're going to have the coins session in that corner over there. And we just need chairs for that. So if at some point during the break you can bring your chair in there, that would be great. And we'll leave it there for now. We got another break and we got a meal time. Okay.
I was just gonna give. No, I don't have to.
That's a big personal.
Yeah, so
I'm a patient because I haven't seen him for several months. He doesn't live here. I just wanted to say hello as well.
Yeah, I can talk to
lot of
Barb, ever access to mine, huh?
creative stuff to tell that.
Oh, good.